Hello everyone and welcome to Hill Street. Today's story is something that looks like my mom keeps asking me to sacrifice myself. If you end up enjoying this story, please leave a like. And if you enjoy hearing stories from me, please subscribe and become a resident of Hill Street and let me know how I'm doing in the comments. Now, let's get to this nightmare. The first time it happened was a month ago. I was walking my dog, Max, in the local park a little late into the night. Before you start commenting, why would you go to the park at night? Blah blah. I usually go at night because 1, no one is there to gripe to me about my dog not being on a leash, and 2, I work an odd middle of the day shift. There wasn't anything particularly special about that night. I was going around the bend on the edge of the park's trail when out of nowhere I heard whispering. A chill went up my spine as my eyes darted back and forth into the dark. I made sure to stay in as much of the moonlight as possible, not moving an inch. Max seemed just on edge as me, a gentle growl muttering from his saggy lips. I called out a few times, declaring I was armed and not to be trifled with. This was a lie, but they didn't need to know that. After a few moments, the whispers began to grow louder and louder. As they grew, the chill became worse. It started getting cold. Max was glaring his teeth and growling as loud as he could at this point, jumping on his front legs from one side to another, as if he was trying to figure out everything himself. I was going to grab him and make a dash before the whispers stopped. I waited there, my breath becoming apparent in the moonlight. This wouldn't have bothered me if it weren't the middle of August. I'm too afraid to move. I waited for what seemed like an eternity before someone spoke. Jeremy. A voice called out. It was startling to say the least, and yet comforting. The voice seemed so familiar, like a long-forgotten memory of a brighter time. Jeremy. The voice rang louder in my ears this time. That's when I realized why the voice seemed so familiar. It was my mom. My mother's voice was ringing in my ears. You see, my mother has been dead since I was 12. It's been 15 years. 15 years ago, I watched her casket slowly lower into a grave, and that's where she should be. And yet, Jeremy, you have to help me, my mother told me. Her voice trembled as she spoke this time. I opened my mouth to reply, but I closed my eyes and shook my head violently side to side as if it reset my brain. This was insane. There was zero chance I was really hearing my dead mother. Despite my disapproval, she persisted. Jeremy, I know you can hear me, she cried out. Okay then, what? Just how? How is this happening? This cannot be real, I responded, finally with a croak. The final straw that broke me that night was when I felt a brush against my right ear. It felt like lips. I slapped the air to my right with all the might I could muster. I couldn't handle this. This was too much. Before I realized, I was sprinting back to my apartment. I didn't live too far away from the park, thankfully, and since Max was a good boy, he followed diligently behind me. As soon as we made it inside, I slammed the door and locked it. A million questions were running through my head. Was it real? God, was it real? It couldn't have been. I must be going mad. What are the actual chances that any of this is happening? After Max and I calmed down, I decided that I probably just needed some sleep. Man, the human mind will tell itself anything to cope. I'd been laying on my bed for what felt like hours before I inevitably drifted away. Max was tucked between my legs, fast asleep as soon as we had laid down. Lucky dog. I don't usually dream when I sleep. It's pretty rare, and when I do, I don't remember anything. However, this one will haunt me for a long, long time. I woke up in my childhood bedroom. The feeling of nostalgic comfort washed over me as I looked around the dimly lit room. My toy chest was over to the left, the white dresser that had been painted probably a dozen times because I could just not stop drawing on it. The closet, where I made a small fort inside, just for one. I reached over and turned on the small nightlight to illuminate the room a bit better. I wish I hadn't. Standing in the doorway was my mom. Well, what looked like my mom. I don't know what it was about her. She looked the same as the last time I saw her. The dark black hair, her gentle eyes, the reassuring smile she always gave to show me everything would be all right. She was my mom, and yet there was that feeling, like in the park. It was all familiar, but felt wrong, so wrong. "Jeremy, I need your help," she whispered softly. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to react. All I could muster was a simple, "What?" As soon as I spoke, she slowly crept to the foot of my bed and watched me, never blinking. She smelled sweet, so sweet in fact, that it almost covered up what hid underneath. It smelled like meat that had started to go bad. "I need you to do something for me. It's the only way I can be free," she whispered to me and reached her hand towards me. I recoiled slowly, trying to keep some distance. As she reached, I realized why she seemed so different. It was her skin. It looked like it had been painted on. It cracked and flaked, revealing a dark blue underneath. "You aren't my mom," I gasped and flung myself as far back against the wall as I could. There was nowhere to go. I was trapped. Her face began to crack, splintering like wood under too much pressure. "I need you. I need you to sacrifice yourself." The creature snarled out at me. She reached for and gripped my throat as tightly as she could, pulling me to her and pressing her forehead to mine. Her once blue eyes are now gray and glossy. "Won't you do it for me, sweetie?" she whispered, as if almost to beg me. This was the first time, and that's what happens every time. Every day for the last month, she asked me. Some days she looked better than others. Some days she looked exactly like her. She even smells right. But it always goes back to the first time, when she shows what's underneath. I haven't slept in days. I've called in for the last 2 weeks because of her. When I'm awake, it's no better. She constantly begs me over and over. "Please, Jeremy, I need you. It's the only way." Her voice never leaves my ears. I haven't left the house because I can't talk to anyone. All I hear are her words over and over. Last week I texted my brother to come and take Max. He looked so sad when I gave him to Michael. Michael tried to question me, of course, but I just gently shut the door in his face. I would have felt bad if I could feel anything at all now. That's why I've been writing this over the course of the last 3 hours. I don't know if any of you can help me. I feel so hopeless. I had to try and put out my story because it promised me something in return. Last night, it stopped pretending. She told me that if I gave my life, I could see Mom again. But if I don't, she's going to take her where the light has never shone. My eyes are growing heavy now, and I'm afraid of what will happen to me on the other side.